Okay, hi booktube, Aaron here. I hope you're doing very well. Today I thought I'd just make a quick reading update. It's been a little while since I've made one. I'm going to do my best not to say it in every video that I make, but we've just had a new baby here, and so everything's been a bit up in the air, as you can imagine. Um, but we're slowly getting into a bit more of a rhythm, and we're getting some sleep, although it's a little interrupted. And I have been able to read as well. Um, Although, like the sleep, it's been quite interrupted as well. But I thought I'd just try to make a quick video going through what I've been reading recently and what I've finished since the last time I made a video. So there are two things that I finished. There's the Sonnets to Orpheus by Rilke. This was translated by Christian Marx, and I really actually quite like this. It's not my favourite translation of Sonnets to Orpheus, but they were pretty good, and I felt like this read through gave me a bit more of an idea of what it's about and about. Well, it was actually coming up a lot. It was coming up, this idea, in some of the other things that I was reading, um, but essentially how, organically death is kind of a part of life, and that things need to decompose so that you have nutrients for new things to grow. And that's kind of what's going on in the Sonnets to Orpheus. That it's a way of um, finding a way to cope with death, but also celebrating life at the same time. And so, yeah, as I said, I enjoyed it. I felt like I got more out of them than the last time I read them. But I think as a translation on the whole, I preferred the other ones that I read, which were by Edward Snow. And then the other thing that I finished is Earthsea, the first four books by Ursula K. Le Guin. And these were the first things I'd ever read by Ursula K. Le Guin, so it was really fun to get to know her a bit as a writer. And again, I really enjoyed these books, these four books. It's I'll go through, give you the names. So the first one is A Wizard of Earthsea, and then there's The Tombs of Atuan, The Farthest Shore, and Tehanu. And I suppose the first two, they're much shorter, and essentially introducing two characters that um, are going to become more and more important as the books go on, and they're kind of coming of age stories. And so the first one is our main character, Sparrowhawk, learning to be a wizard, but also realizing that he's proud, and in his pride, he tries to kind of encounter spell that he shouldn't have, and goes too far and releases his shadow. And so a lot of the plot is him learning how to sort of overcome, or how to come into balance with his shadow. And it's very direct. All of them, on the whole, are very direct, and I don't know. I'm trying to think of the right word. There's just kind of one main story, and it just goes with it. There's not much by way of side plots or anything like that, which makes for nice, fast reading. It's easy to uh, know what's going on, and particularly the first book, it's jumping all over the place in terms of location. And so, with having a relatively simple, straightforward plot, it's kind of allowing you to get used to this world, I think, and its geography and the magic system and the customs and things like that. So that's probably the most fun thing, I think, about the first book, is that it's just a great um, kind of soft introduction to this world. And then the second book, which I think is my favourite still, is called the Tombs of Atuan, and it's it it's quite interesting that you've just had this introduction to the world, and it starts with totally different characters just on this one island that's not really been mentioned that much so far in the other books. So you don't really know much about its history, and it feels very different. It kind of felt like, I don't know whether they're kind of like Vikings there or like ancient Greeks. There's a sort of strange religious cults, and there are a couple of different cults. There's kind of a cult for the emperor, who's a god, and then there's this older, darker, more mysterious cult. And the main character in this one really is a young girl who has become the high priestess of this other cult, and um, they believe that the high priestess is eternal. So when the last high priestess died, they looked for a girl who was born at the exact same time or on the exact same night, and so in that way she's kind of eternal, and they bring her up to for her to believe that she's always been this one person, and that she just needs to slowly remember everything. Um, and it's much darker, much more mysterious. They have these weird rites and rituals that they go through, and there's a massive sprawling labyrinth underneath the underneath the temple, and then suddenly the main character Sparrowhawk is found under there, and you're just sort of trying to work out why he's there and how our new main character is going to react to that. So that was my favorite. It felt a bit darker, a bit stranger, and it's interesting. You kind of put everything that you'd read in the first one in a slightly different context, since most of the other characters are kind of it mentions them being sort of brown skinned, whether they're, I don't know whether they're supposed to be sort of Polynesian, or there's not the typical sort of Northern European white people that you normally get in a fantasy book, and so then you have this other culture where she kind of goes out of her way to tell you that they're white, and that's actually a bit different. And when they come into contact with other people from other places, they stand out. And so it's just an interesting inversion as well in terms of race. And then you've got the farthest shore, which is the questiest, I think, of all of them. We're back with Sparrowhawk in that one. And then the last book, Tehanu, is just totally different. It is a much quieter, I think, a much more mature book out of the four of them, and it's essentially the fallout after this quest that's happened. So it's all in one place. It's very specific in its locality, and our characters are older and have been through a lot more by that point. And it's interesting because you get the impression that the main idea in the plot of this one it's supposed to be much more personal, I suppose, and so the stakes compared to the other books are much lower, because there have been sort of worldwide kind of sort of saving the world kind of stuff in the previous books, and so in this one then it feels like it's small stakes, but actually as you get right to the end, you actually get the impression that something very significant and world changing has actually happened, just not in the way you expect it. So I don't really know how else to sort of go into these and talk about them, other than they're really, really fun, really delightful. As the title suggests, there are more Earthsea books. There's a complete Earthsea that has some really cool looking dragons on the front, so I'm sort of tempted by that. But yeah, I'll be going back to Le Guin before too long. But yeah, really, really enjoyed it. And that's all I've finished, as is, I hope, kind of understandable. But I've been reading plenty of things, and I've been really enjoying what I've been reading. One of the things I've been doing, and most of the things I'm reading are quite easy to dip in and out of, and so It won't take too much time to just read a chapter or a short story or a couple of poems. And the first one is City by Clifford D. Simak. I'm reading this with a group that's being headed up by Sean D. Standfast, and we're just reading a couple of stories every week, so I'm kind of concentrating on reading them at the weekends. I think I've actually read ahead since I'm up to the fifth tale now. So I might read 5 and 6 this weekend and get ahead again. But I'm really enjoying it. It's really again it's just an interesting world, and each story is more interesting and pushes things further than the last. So I've been really enjoying City. Most of my reading has been Don Quixote by Cervantes, and I'm nearly halfway through. I'm on page, well, yeah, I think I'm about 40% of the way through. I'm nearly 400 pages into it, which is quite surprising, but it is a much funnier and more cartoonish book than I was expecting it to be in the best possible way. So it's just been a delight to read, and it's out of everything I'm reading at the moment, probably the one thing that's been pulling me the most to go back to it. It's just a lot of fun, and I'll try to talk about this a little bit more once I've finished it. I was planning, when I made my sort of March TBR video, I said that I'd probably read just the first part this month and then see how it went, and read the second part later. But at the rate I'm going, I might actually be able to read the whole thing. So we'll see how it goes. I'll still have to be playing things by ear. Then I've been reading some more Tolstoy with Alan from Big Hard Books and Classics. We've been reading A Confession and Other Religious Writings, and it's been, I suppose, mainly more interesting than enjoyable. Some of it's quite dense. I would say that the essay, A Confession, is probably the most interesting out of them. It's much more personal. It's sort of him explaining how he came to his particular religious convictions, and they're quite unorthodox, very individual, I suppose. And I've just read the third essay in here, which is called Religion and Morality, where he's trying to define the two and trying to work out whether you can have morality without religion, which I'm not really sure whether he really explained it very well. But the last paragraph is quite interesting, and he's assuming that you have asked him a question. It starts off with asking, you have asked me, 1, what I understand by the word religion, and 2, do I consider it possible for morality to exist independently of religion as I understand it? And then the rough sum up at the end is, and so in reply to your 2 questions, I say, religion is a particular relationship that man establishes between his own separate personality and the infinite universe, or its origin, and morality is the permanent guide to life that follows from this relationship. So his definition is very broad, and it's also very individualistic, and sort of it relies on you and your own conscience, I suppose, on the whole. And so yeah, I often don't really agree with him. I often find him perplexing and feel like he's not actually saying what he's setting out to say. Um, but in the context of his own story, because you've had that essay, A Confession, at the beginning, going through his own experiences and um, I suppose what led him to believe the things that he believes, you can kind of understand why he's saying the things that he says. So yeah, it's interesting stuff. I think both me and Alan have been finding it quite dense. And the last essay in here is called The Law of Love and the Law of Violence, which I'm hoping will go a little more into pacifism. And I'm quite intrigued about what he has to say about that. And then finally, I've been reading Sylvia Plath's collected poems. And as well, this is, when I'm not sure if I'm going to have much time to read, just great to pick up and just read a poem or two. Um, it has them all laid out, as you can see at the top here, just got a year. So it's just laid out by which poems you wrote in any particular year. And so some of them are from collections, some of them I'm not sure whether they really made it into collections, and there's juvenilia at the back. And it's been interesting to see her um, change and develop as a poet. I think out of her earlier poems, I much prefer it when she often uses a lot of sort of Emily Dickinson-esque slant rhyming. And so there's some interesting sort of formal techniques going on, but they're sort of dimmed a little bit, so they don't seem too show-offy. And then there are some poems where the language does feel a little more heightened and kind of unnatural. It doesn't quite sound like her. It sounds like she's trying to sound like Andrew Marvell, or some other metaphysical poet. And there are times when she sounds a bit like Ted Hughes as well, and or maybe it went the other way, and actually she well, I know that she did actually have quite an influence on his writing. And so yeah, it's just been interesting to see her develop as a poet. When I was reading her biography, Red Comet, um, what's her name? The Heather Clark, the author, she would kind of go into sort of readings of all sorts of poems, sometimes juvenilia, sometimes um, sort of published works, and she'd go into whether she thought it was convincing, whether it really sounded like her. And in the context of the biography, I wouldn't always agree with her. I would kind of think, oh, that sounds like a pretty good poem. But actually, sort of just reading them all together, I mean, I'm only about 70, 80 pages in, but sort of reading them in this context, I'm finding myself probably agreeing with Heather Clark a bit more about when Plath is being a little more convincing and a little more sounding a little more like herself. So yeah, it's been really intriguing. There are poems in here that I've read before and I enjoy, and probably a fair few that are new to me as well. And that's it. That's all I've been reading at the moment. In the last video I made in the reading plans video, I remember I left out um, oh, is it There's No Place Like Rome, which is a reading event, I think in March and April, celebrating Roman authors, or just any literature set in Rome, or history books about Rome, and things like that. And I really wanted to join in, and I left out sort of any kind of selection or mention for that event. I do have some Seneca on my Kindle that I quite like to get to, and particularly at night time, if I'm staying up with the baby and I have to keep the lights down low, then it might be useful to have something on my Kindle to read if I can, and it's sort of lighter and easier to hold than a book, so that if my other hand is indisposed, then it'll be fairly simple and easy. But yeah, I won't dedicate myself to that. I haven't dedicated myself to the Confessions by St. Augustine either, as I'm not sure if that will send me to sleep or not. But that is everything at the moment. I will try to be back as soon as I can. Things seem to be getting, finding um, the new normal, I suppose. So I might be able to make a couple more videos in the next couple of weeks. But for now, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.